I came home early that Tuesday. The house was quiet, except for the water running upstairs. When I opened the bathroom door, everything I thought I knew ended. They didn't even see me at first. Daniel was leaning back in the tub like it was just another evening, one arm stretched along the edge. Karen sat across from him, her hand resting on his knee, both of them laughing about something I'd missed. The bathroom light was soft yellow, almost cozy. Steam fogged the mirror. I could smell her lavender body wash mixed with his aftershave clean, familiar wrong. That's what hit me hardest. Not that they were naked. Not even that it was my best friend and my husband. It was how normal they looked, comfortable, like this had been happening for a while. I stood there for maybe 3 seconds, maybe less. Long enough to see Karen tilt her head back and laugh, long enough to see Daniel reach for her hand without thinking. Something inside me didn't shatter. It went still. I stepped back quietly and pulled the door almost closed again. My hand found the latch on the outside, old simple something Daniel had installed years ago when Emily was little. I don't even remember why. But it was there. I hesitated. For a split second I thought about pushing the door open, screaming, throwing whatever I could grab, ending it right there in a mess of noise and tears. My fingers trembled against the metal. Not today. I slid the latch into place. There was a soft click. Inside they didn't notice, not yet. I stood there for another moment listening, water still running, their voices low, easy, like nothing in the world was about to come apart. Then I turned and walked downstairs. Their phones were sitting on the kitchen counter. Daniel's face down, Karen's next to it, buzzing softly with a notification. I picked them up without thinking and set them farther back out of reach. It felt automatic, like putting groceries away. My heart was beating, but not fast, heavy, slow, like each beat had weight to it. I looked around my kitchen. The same one I'd stood in for years, same coffee maker, same little crack in the tile near the sink, a dish towel draped over the oven handle. Everything looked exactly the same. And nothing was. Upstairs I heard it. A pause in their conversation, then a faint shift in tone. "Did you hear something?" Karen's voice. I didn't wait. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Mike's number. My thumb hovered for just a second. Mike Mitchell, Karen's husband. We'd had dinner together just 2 weeks ago, sat around this same table, talked about weather taxes, retirement plans. I hit call. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey Lisa, everything okay?" My voice came out steady, calm, almost detached. "Mike, it's Lisa. Something's happening at my house. You need to come, now." There was a pause. What do you mean?" "Just come, please." I hung up before he could ask anything else. Upstairs the tone had changed. Lisa, Karen's voice again, louder this time. "Lisa, are you home?" A thud against the door. Then Daniel, "Hey, why isn't this opening?" I walked over to the bottom of the stairs and looked up. The hallway was quiet except for the muffled sound of movement. Another thud, harder. Lisa, Daniel's voice now sharper. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, one hand resting on the banister, feeling the smooth wood under my palm. My hand had stopped shaking. It was strange. For years I'd imagined what I would do if something like this ever happened. I always thought I'd fall apart, cry, scream, maybe even beg for an explanation. But standing there listening to them on the other side of that door, I felt clear. Like a fog had lifted. "Lisa, this isn't funny," Karen's voice cracked a little. "Open the door." I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes for a second. How long had this been going on? Under my roof, in my home, in the space I'd cleaned, paid for, built piece by piece over decades. Upstairs, Daniel's voice dropped lower, more controlled. That tone he used when he was trying to fix something. "Lisa, let's just talk about this, okay? Open the door." I almost laughed. Talk. That word felt small now. Another loud bang rattled the door. "Lisa." I opened my eyes and checked the time on my phone. 2:21 p.m. Mike would need about 10 minutes, maybe a little more with traffic. He lived just across town. I walked into the living room and sat down on the couch. My couch. The one we'd picked out together 10 years ago after arguing for an hour in a furniture store. I stared at the front door. Upstairs, the noise kept going, knocking, raised voices, the occasional sharp edge of panic creeping in. I let it happen. For once, I didn't rush to fix anything. Minutes passed. I don't know how many. Time felt stretched, like it had slowed down just enough for me to see everything clearly. At 2:27, the doorbell rang. Sharp, clean, final. The noise upstairs stopped for half a second, like even they had heard it. I stood up, smoothed my hands down the front of my shirt, and walked to the door. When I opened it, Mike was standing there slightly out of breath, his keys still in his hand. "Lisa, what's going on?" For a moment I just looked at him. Really looked. A man who had no idea his life was about to split in half. I stepped aside. "They're upstairs." He didn't move right away. Then from above, Karen's voice, louder now, edged with something close to fear. "Mike." His face changed. Not all at once, but enough. He walked past me without another word. I closed the door behind him. Mike took the stairs 2 at a time. I didn't follow right away. I stayed where I was, one hand still resting on the front door, listening as his footsteps thudded up the steps, quick and heavy. Then silence. Just for a second. Then, "What the hell is going on?" His voice sharp, confused, not angry yet, not fully. Another beat, then Karen's voice, higher now, rushed. "Mike, it's not what you think." A loud rattling of the doorknob. "Why is this door locked?" I exhaled slowly and pushed myself off the door. My legs felt steady, more than steady, grounded. I walked toward the stairs. Halfway up I could hear everything clearly now. The panic had settled in upstairs. You could hear it in the way people spoke, faster, louder words stepping over each other. "Lisa locked it," Daniel said, his tone trying to stay controlled but slipping. Just open the door." Mike didn't answer right away. Then quieter but heavier. "Lisa locked you in there." I stopped on the landing. For a second no one spoke. Then Karen again, softer now, almost pleading. Can you tell her to open it, please?" I stepped into the hallway. All 3 of them went quiet. I stood there looking at the closed bathroom door. It looked exactly like it always had. White paint slightly chipped near the handle. Nothing about it suggested what was happening on the other side. "Lisa," Daniel said, voice tightening. "Open the door." I didn't move. Not yet. Silence. You could feel it shift. That was the moment things changed. When they realized I wasn't reacting, I was deciding. Mike turned slightly toward me. His face had lost color. Not pale exactly, but drained. "What is this?" he asked. Not loud, not dramatic, just a man trying to understand something he didn't want to understand. I met his eyes. "They're in there together." He swallowed. His jaw moved like he was about to say something, then stopped. "You're sure?" I held his gaze. "Yes." Upstairs, a quiet shuffle. The kind people make when they know they've been seen. Mike stepped closer to the door but didn't touch it. His hand hovered near the knob, then dropped back to his side. Daniel spoke again, sharper this time. "Lisa, this is ridiculous. Open the door, now." I looked at the latch. For a second I felt it again, that pull, the urge to just end this, open it, let it explode, get it over with. My fingers curled slightly. But then something else pushed through. Not anger. Clarity. "Before I do that," I said, keeping my voice even, "there's something you should hear." No one responded. I turned slightly toward Mike. "I've been handling Daniel's business accounts for years," I said. "You know that." He nodded faintly. "Yeah." "I started noticing things a few months ago," I continued. "Small at first. Charges that didn't line up. Payments marked as business expenses that didn't belong there." From inside, Daniel's voice snapped. "Lisa, this is not the time." I ignored him. I double-checked everything. Thought maybe I'd made a mistake. I shook my head slightly. I hadn't. Mike's eyes flickered. Not fully understanding yet, but listening. "What kind of charges?" he asked. "Hotels," I said. "Weekend bookings, out of town, listed as client visits." I paused. There were no clients. Silence behind the door. "Gifts, too," I added. "Expensive ones, charged through the business." Karen made a small sound. Not quite a word. More like breath-catching. That was enough. Mike turned his head slightly toward the door. "Karen." No answer. My chest tightened, not with panic, but something heavier. Recognition. "She knew," I said quietly. It landed. Mike's shoulders stiffened. "You're guessing," Daniel shot back quickly. "Too quickly. You don't know that." I looked at the door. I do. Another silence, thicker this time. Mike took a slow breath, then another. His hand finally reached for the door but still didn't open it. "Lisa," he said, not looking at me open it. For a moment I didn't move. This was it. The line. Everything before this had been contained, controlled. Once that door opened, there was no putting it back. My hand went to the latch. I could feel the cool metal under my fingers, solid, real. For just a second, my hand trembled again. Not from fear, from the weight of it. 23 years of marriage, a friendship I had trusted, a life I had believed in, all sitting on the other side of a simple lock. I slid the latch back. The click sounded louder this time. Mike opened the door slowly. The steam rolled out first. Then them. Karen stood wrapped in a white towel, her hair damp, eyes wide, fixed somewhere just past me. She didn't look at Mike, not at first. Daniel stepped out behind her, grabbing another towel, his face flushed, not from heat, but something closer to panic. "Okay," he said quickly, forcing a tone that didn't match the situation. "We can talk about this." "No," Mike said. It wasn't loud. But it stopped everything. Karen finally looked at him. "Mike." He held up a hand. "Don't." The hallway felt smaller now. Too many people, too much air. Daniel looked at me, anger flashing. "You locked us in a room," he said. "What is wrong with you?" I met his eyes. "You should be asking yourself that." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since I'd seen him in that tub, he didn't have something ready to say. Good. I stepped back slightly, giving space in the hallway. "Before anyone says anything else," I said, keeping my voice level, "we're all going to sit down." Karen shook her head faintly. "Lisa, please." "No," I said, "not like this." Mike let out a slow breath, his gaze still fixed somewhere between Karen and the floor. "Yeah," he said quietly, "we are." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, water still dripping onto the floor. "This is insane," he muttered. I looked at him. "No," I said, "this is clear." For a second, no one moved. Then Mike stepped back, creating space in the hallway. "Living room," he said. Karen hesitated, clutching the towel tighter around herself. Daniel lingered a second longer, like he was still trying to figure out how to regain control of something that had already slipped. He couldn't. None of them could. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. We sat in the living room, but no one really settled. Karen stayed on the edge of the armchair, still wrapped in that towel, her damp hair clinging to her neck. Daniel hovered near the fireplace like he didn't know whether to sit or stand. Mike took the far end of the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight enough that his knuckles had gone pale. I stayed standing. That seemed right. For a moment no one spoke, just the low hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, a car passing outside, ordinary sounds that didn't match what was happening in that room. Daniel broke first. "Okay," he said, forcing a breath out. "We need to calm down and talk about this like adults." I almost smiled. "Go ahead," I said, "talk." He hesitated. That wasn't like him. Daniel always had something to say, especially when he thought he could fix a situation. "This," he gestured vaguely, not quite looking at Karen, "this wasn't what it looks like." Mike let out a short, dry laugh. "Really?" Karen's voice came quick, desperate. "It just happened. We didn't plan it." I looked at her. "You didn't plan the water running, the door closed, the phones downstairs." I shook my head once. "No, that didn't just happen." She flinched. Daniel's tone sharpened. "Lisa, you're blowing this out of proportion." "That did it. Not the affair, not the lies. That sentence. Out of proportion." Something shifted inside me again, but this time it wasn't quiet. It was precise. I pulled a chair out from the dining table and sat down across from them. "Let's talk about proportion," I said. Mike leaned back slightly, watching me now, really watching. Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said calmly, "this isn't just about the two of you being in that bathtub." Karen's eyes flickered. Daniel straightened. "Then what is it about?" I held his gaze. "Money." That word landed differently. Not emotional, not messy. Real. Mike's head turned toward me. "What about it?" I rested my hands in my lap, steady. "I've been handling Daniel's business accounts for years," I said. "You both know that." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Lisa." No, I cut in, not raising my voice. You've had your turn. That surprised him. I could see it. I went on. A few months ago, I started noticing discrepancies, small ones, at first. Karen shifted in her seat. Charges that didn't line up with any job, I said. Expenses marked as business-related that had nothing to do with the business. Mike's brow furrowed. Like what? Hotels, I said, weekends, out of town. Daniel exhaled sharply. Those were client meetings. I looked at him. No, they weren't. Silence. I continued my tone even. I called the clients listed on those invoices, followed up. Every single one said the same thing: they hadn't seen you in months. Mike's eyes moved slowly from me to Daniel. Is that true? Daniel didn't answer right away. Karen's grip tightened on the towel. I kept going. There were also purchases, jewelry, gifts, charged through the business as equipment or supplies. Karen looked down. That was enough. Mike noticed. His voice dropped. Karen, look at me. She didn't. That told him everything. He leaned back, shaking his head once slow. You knew. She whispered, Mike, You knew, he repeated louder this time, not yelling, worse than that. Certain. Daniel stepped in quickly. This isn't all on her, okay? I made those decisions. I turned to him. You didn't just make decisions, I said. You used the business, my work, the accounts I kept balanced for years. My voice stayed steady, but I felt it now. Not anger exactly, something deeper. Ownership. That money wasn't just numbers on a page, I said. That was my time, my nights, my effort keeping everything running. Daniel opened his mouth, then stopped. For the first time since I'd known him, he didn't have a quick answer. Good. Mike rubbed his face with both hands, then dropped them. How much, he asked quietly. I didn't hesitate. Enough. That was all I needed to say. The room went still. Karen finally looked up, her eyes red now. It wasn't like that, she said, voice shaking. I didn't ask for anything. I met her gaze. You didn't have to. She looked away again. Daniel ran a hand over the back of his neck. Okay, we can fix this, he said, shifting into that familiar tone again. We'll straighten out the accounts. I'll pay it back, whatever needs to be done. I shook my head. Number. He blinked. What do you mean, no? I mean, I said you don't get to fix this now. His frustration broke through. Lisa, we've been married for over 20 years. You don't just throw that away because of what I cut in. He stopped. I leaned forward slightly. Because of a mistake, I asked. Is that what you're calling it? He didn't answer. I let the silence sit there. Then I said it. You didn't just cheat on me. My voice was calm, clear. You used me. Karen closed her eyes. Mike looked down. Daniel stared at me like he didn't recognize who was sitting across from him. I held his gaze. I built that life, I said. You just spent it. That was the moment. You could feel it. Whatever version of this conversation Daniel thought he could control, it was gone. He leaned back slowly, like something had finally hit him. This isn't like you, he said. I almost laughed. No, I said, it's not. Mike stood up, suddenly pacing once across the room, then back again. Jesus, he muttered, all this time. Karen's voice cracked. Mike, please. He stopped, turning toward her. I don't even know what to say to you right now. She shrank back into the chair. Daniel looked between all of us, his control slipping further. So what now, he asked, frustration rising again. We just sit here and tear everything apart. I stood up slowly. No, I said. He frowned. Then what? I walked to the small table near the window, picked up a folder, and turned back to them. We don't tear anything apart, I said. I already did what needed to be done. The room changed the second they saw the folder in my hand. It was nothing special, plain manila, a little bent at one corner from riding around in my work tote for 2 days. But it might as well have been a brick of concrete from the way all 4 of them looked at it. Daniel's face tightened first. What is that? I didn't answer him right away. I set the folder on the coffee table, opened it, and pulled out a stack of papers clipped neatly together. Bank statements, expense reports, copies of transfers, notes in my handwriting, dates circled in blue ink. Mike stared at the pages. Karen stopped breathing for a second. I could see it. I looked at Daniel. This is what you've been asking me to ignore. He let out a hard breath through his nose. Lisa, for God's sake. No, I kept my voice even. You don't get to use that tone with me in my own house. That shut him up. I took the top sheet and handed it to Mike first, then one to Karen, then one to Daniel. I kept the last one for myself. Nobody wanted to touch them, but they did. This charge, I said, tapping the date with my finger, was from a hotel in Lake Geneva. 2 nights. You marked it as an overnight service call tied to a commercial refrigeration issue. Daniel glanced down and then back at me. It was a work trip. No, it wasn't, I said. I called the client on that invoice. They said nobody from Carter Heating and Air had been there in 8 months. Mike's jaw shifted. Karen kept staring at the paper like maybe it would say something different if she looked long enough. I lifted another page. This one, I said, was a spa package in Galena, charged as replacement parts. Daniel's voice rose. Okay, enough. We all know what this is. I turned to him. Do we? Yes, Lisa, we do. You're embarrassed, you're angry, and now you're trying to humiliate me. I actually smiled then, just a little. No, Daniel. Humiliating you would have been dragging you out of that bathtub in front of the neighbors. That landed. Nobody moved. What I'm doing, I said, is documenting. He stared at me. He hated that word. Too clean, too practical, too final. Mike flipped to the next page. What's this transfer? I answered before Daniel could. $3,800. Marked as emergency equipment rental. There was no rental. The money went to a personal account. Mike looked up sharply. Whose account? I met his eyes. Karen's. Karen whispered it wasn't like that. That phrase again? I turned toward her. Then tell me what it was like. She opened her mouth, closed it. Her eyes filled, but I felt nothing from it. Maybe that sounds cruel. Maybe it is. But by then, I was past tears. Hers and mine. Daniel stepped in again. I sent her money because she was having a hard time, okay? Things were rough at home. Mike looked at him so slowly it made my skin prickle. Rough at home, he said. Karen inhaled fast. Mike. No, he said, and his voice stayed low, which was worse. Let him finish. Daniel looked trapped for the first time. He glanced at me, then Mike, then Karen, like there might still be one corner of the room where he could stand and come out looking decent. There wasn't. She needed help, he said. Mike laughed once. It was an ugly sound. So you used your wife's books to fund an affair and now you're calling it help. Daniel's ears turned red. I didn't say that. You didn't have to, Mike said. Karen stood abruptly, clutching the towel tighter around herself. I can't do this. I looked at her. You already did. She froze. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was doing the work for me. For a second I thought Mike might walk out. Instead he sat back down slower this time, like his legs had suddenly become much older than they were. I understood that feeling. I handed him another page. This is from last Sunday, I said. A charge at Morton's in Rosemont, $412, marked as vendor relations. Daniel shook his head. You went through everything. Yes, I said. I did the job you should have been doing. He muttered something under his breath. What was that, I asked. He looked away. I let it go. I didn't need his muttering. I had dates, amounts, signatures. That was enough. Mike kept reading. And Tom knows none of this. Not yet, I said. Daniel looked up fast. Leave Tom out of this. I held his gaze. Why? Because this is between us. That almost made me laugh. No, I said. The affair was between the two of you. The money involved your company, your partner, our taxes, our house, Emily's future. You made it everybody's business the second you decided your wants mattered more than consequences. Karen sank back down into the chair. Her face had gone flat now. Not innocent, not ashamed enough, just cornered. That bothered me more than tears would have. I looked at Mike. I didn't call you over here just to witness what I found upstairs. He waited. I called because I wasn't going to be the only one blindsided in my own life. He nodded once, small, grim. That was all. The afternoon dragged forward in that living room until the light outside changed and the windows turned gold. Nobody yelled. Nobody stormed out. Honestly, I think that would have been easier. Quieter people are harder to ignore because every word lands. By 6 o'clock, Mike had left with Karen. He didn't slam the door. He didn't look at her much either. That was worse for her than shouting would have been. She paused at the threshold and tried once to meet my eyes. I didn't give her that. Daniel stayed. Of course he stayed. It was his house too, at least for the moment. He followed me into the kitchen while I put the papers back in the folder. So what now? He asked. His voice had dropped, less angry, more calculating. I kept stacking pages. Now you tell me the truth, I said. I already have. I looked up. No, you've managed. He leaned against the counter. You really want to do this? Blow up everything? That word again, as if I were the one with the matches. I put the folder down. I'm not blowing up anything, I said. I'm cleaning up what you already wrecked. His face hardened. You think you can just take over, ruin my business, turn Emily against me? I stared at him. Then I said the thing I'd been holding in all afternoon. You still think this is about your comfort? That shut him up for a second. I went on. By Sunday I said you're going to sit at that dining room table. You, me, Mike, Karen, Tom, and Emily. His eyes narrowed. Absolutely not. Yes, I said, absolutely. Emily does not need to be dragged into this. I took a breath. That part had been sitting heavy on my chest all day. He was right about one thing. I didn't want our daughter in the middle of it. But she was 42 years old, not 12. She lived in Aurora. She had a husband, 2 kids, and enough life behind her to recognize a lie when she heard one. She's already in it, I said quietly. She just doesn't know it yet. Daniel pushed off the counter. I'm not doing some public trial in my own house. I picked up the folder. It won't be a trial, I said. It'll be dinner. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe that was useful. You can't be serious. I'm serious enough that I already spoke to an attorney. That took the air out of him. It showed in his shoulders first, then in the way his mouth parted slightly like he needed a second to catch up. You what? I met with her yesterday morning, I said, after I finished reviewing the last quarter's accounts. That part was true. I'd met with Nancy Wilcox, a divorce attorney in downtown Naperville, who'd handled a friend's estate issue a few years back. I hadn't walked into her office planning every detail of what would happen next, but once I laid everything out, she'd looked at me over her glasses and said very plainly, "Do not let him get ahead of the paperwork." So I hadn't. Daniel rubbed one hand over his face. Lisa. That tone, softer now. Regretful maybe, or maybe just scared. Too late. I'm not asking your permission, I said. He looked down at the folder. And what exactly do you think happens on Sunday? I pictured it so clearly I could almost smell the rosemary chicken already. The table set properly, cloth napkins. Emily sitting straight-backed and watchful. Tom realizing piece by piece what had been hidden from him. Mike hearing numbers instead of excuses. Daniel finally unable to talk his way around facts. I looked back at him. On Sunday I said everybody hears the same truth at the same table. He shook his head slowly. You're making a mistake. No, I said. I made mistakes when I ignored the signs. I'm done doing that. He looked at me for a long time, then he said, This isn't like you. I picked up the folder and tucked it under my arm. No, I said. It's what you left me with. By Sunday afternoon the house smelled like garlic butter and roasted chicken. That might sound strange. To season food while your marriage is ending, to polish glasses while your husband walks around the house pretending he still has any say in what comes next. But there was something steadying about it. I chopped carrots, set out the good dishes, folded the cream-colored napkins Emily had given me 3 Christmases ago. The normality of it helped. Outside the sky was pale and bright, one of those clear Illinois afternoons that still carried a bite in the air. Our backyard looked exactly the same as it always had. Patio furniture under the cover, a few dead leaves pressed against the fence, the little wind chime by the porch making that hollow clinking sound every now and then. Inside nothing was the same. Daniel had asked twice that morning if I was really going through with it. I didn't answer the first time. The second time I said set the extra chairs up. And he did. At 4:57 Emily arrived first. She walked in carrying a bakery box from Dietta's and kissed my cheek, then looked around the kitchen with that expression daughters get when they know something's off before anyone speaks. Mom, she said quietly, what's going on? Emily had Daniel's dark hair and my eyes. She was 42, practical, sharp, not easily rattled. She'd grown up in this house, learned to ride a bike on this street, brought science projects to this kitchen table. Seeing her there in her tan coat with the cold still in her cheeks nearly cracked me open. But I kept my voice steady. "You'll understand in a little while," I said. "I just need you to trust me until then." She studied my face for a second, then nodded once. "Okay." That nearly undid me more than anything else had. Tom arrived at 5:03. Tall, broad-shouldered, graying at the temples, still in his work boots because he'd come straight from a service call in Bolingbrook. He held a bottle of red wine in one hand and looked mildly confused when Daniel opened the door. "Thought this was just family," he said. Daniel forced a smile that barely reached his face. Plans changed. Tom glanced past him and saw me in the dining room, saw the table already set, saw maybe the tension hanging in the air like heat before a summer storm. He walked in more slowly after that. Mike and Karen arrived last. Mike wore a navy quarter-zip and jeans. Karen had done her hair, put on makeup, and dressed like this was any other suburban Sunday dinner. That more than anything made me dislike her. The effort of appearing normal. The nerve of it. Nobody hugged. Nobody lingered in the foyer. I invited them in, took Karen's casserole dish out of habit, then handed it right back to her. "We won't need that," I said. Her cheeks colored. By 5:14 everybody was seated. The roast chicken sat in the center of the table untouched. Green beans, mashed potatoes, biscuits wrapped in a clean towel. The whole thing looked like the kind of meal families are supposed to remember fondly years later. I stood at the head of the table. For a second, nobody looked at anybody else. Forks were adjusted, napkins unfolded. A glass moved softly against the wood. Tiny sounds, nervous sounds. Then Emily looked up at me and said very calmly, "Mom, just say it." So I did. On Tuesday afternoon, I said I came home early and found Daniel and Karen together in my bathtub. No one spoke. Emily blinked once. Then again. She didn't gasp. She didn't make a scene. She just turned her head very slowly toward her father. Tom looked from Daniel to Karen to Mike like his brain was still trying to decide if he'd heard me correctly. Mike kept his eyes on the table. Karen whispered Lisa. I held up a hand. "I'm not finished." Daniel straightened in his chair. "This is unnecessary." "The affair is only the first part," I said. That got Tom's attention fast. "What do you mean, first part?" I picked up the folder from the sideboard and placed it on the table. Daniel closed his eyes for 1 second, like he already knew how bad the next 5 minutes were going to be. "Good." I opened the folder and passed copies down the table. Tom took his first. Emily took hers with a slight frown. Mike accepted his without expression. Karen barely touched hers. "These," I said, "are business records from Carter Heating and Air covering the last several months. I kept the books same as I always have, and while I was keeping them, I found charges that were falsified, hidden, or misclassified." Tom's head snapped up. "What?" Daniel jumped in. "It's not what she's making it sound like." I looked at Tom, not Daniel. "There are hotel charges listed as client meetings that never happened, luxury purchases recorded as equipment and supply costs, transfers to personal accounts hidden as emergency expenses." Tom was already flipping pages. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. Daniel leaned forward. "Tom, listen to me." "No," Tom said, still scanning the papers. "You listen. What the hell is this charge in Galena?" I answered, "A spa package." Tom looked up sharply. "A what?" "A spa package," I repeated. "Paid through the business." Emily slowly lowered the page in her hand and looked at her father. Her voice when it came was soft and stunned. "Dad, is this real?" Daniel looked at her, and for the first time all evening he seemed smaller. "Emily, it's complicated." She gave one short shake of her head. "No, it's not." The room went quiet again. Mike turned one more page and stopped at the transfer line. $3,800, he said. "To Karen." Karen whispered, "Mike, please." Tom stared openly now. "You transferred business funds to Karen Mitchell." Daniel rubbed a hand over his mouth. "It was temporary. I spoke before anyone else could." "You didn't just cheat on me," I said, looking straight at Daniel. "You used me." Nobody moved. I could hear the clock in the hallway, the faint hum of the furnace kicking on, the sound of my own breathing steady and even. Then I said the second line I'd carried with me all week. I built that life. You just spent it. Emily's eyes filled instantly. Tom leaned back in his chair, stunned. Mike looked like something in him had gone hard and still all at once. Daniel stared at me with a mix of anger and disbelief, like he still couldn't understand why the old version of me wasn't stepping in to soften this for him. I didn't. He tried one more time. Lisa, you're making this into something bigger than it is. Emily let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh, not amused, hurt. Bigger than it is, she said. You slept with Mom's friend and stole from your own company. Daniel turned to her. Emily. No, her voice sharpened. Don't. That word hung in the room. Tom laid the papers flat on the table. I need to talk to my accountant tomorrow morning, he said. And my attorney. Daniel stared at him. Tom, come on. Tom shook his head. No, don't Tom me. You put me in legal exposure without telling me. Mike finally looked at Karen. Were you going to tell me, he asked. She started crying then. Quietly, not dramatically, just enough to show that the version of the evening she'd hoped to survive was gone. I didn't know how she whispered. Mike nodded once. That's what liars always say when they run out of time. Karen dropped her face into her hands. Daniel pushed his chair back. This is insane. We're not doing this in front of everybody. We already did, I said. Then I reached into the folder one last time. I pulled out a second set of papers, cleaner, thicker, official, and I slid them across the table to him. He looked down. Didn't touch them. What is this, he asked, even though he already knew. Divorce papers, I said, filed Friday morning. Emily covered her mouth. Tom looked away. Mike sat back and exhaled slowly through his nose. Daniel finally picked up the packet with both hands. His fingers looked unsteady. You filed already? Yes. He stared down at the first page, then up at me. You planned all this. I thought about that. The lock, the phone call, Nancy Wilcox's office, the chicken in the oven, the extra chairs, the copies I'd made at Staples on Ogden Avenue, the way I'd lain awake at 3:10 Thursday morning staring at the ceiling, asking myself if I was doing the right thing. No, I said, I prepared. He looked back at the paperwork. There wasn't much left for him to say after that. That was the satisfying part, if I'm being honest. Not his face, not Karen crying, not even Mike sitting there with the truth in front of him at last. It was the silence. The silence of a man who had spent years assuming I'd absorb whatever he handed me, finally realizing I wouldn't. No one touched the food. At some point, Emily got up and stood beside me. She didn't say anything. She just rested one hand lightly against my back. I can't explain how much that steadied me. Tom collected his papers and stood. I'm leaving, he said to Daniel. And tomorrow we deal with this properly. Mike rose too. Karen, get your coat. She wiped her face and stood without arguing. Daniel remained seated, divorce papers still in his hands, staring at them like they might rearrange themselves into mercy if he waited long enough. They didn't. People began moving, chairs scraping, coats lifted from hooks, the low, strained murmur of goodbye without any actual goodbye in it. The front door opened, closed, opened, closed again. And then just like that, the house was quiet. Only this time it was a different kind of quiet. Earned. After everyone left, I didn't clean up right away. I stood in the kitchen for a minute just looking at the table. Plates still full, glasses half-touched, napkins unfolded but barely used. The chicken had gone cold in the center, the skin losing that crispness I'd worked for. It looked like a dinner that never happened. Emily stayed. She moved quietly, gathering plates, stacking them without asking. That was always her way. She didn't rush in with questions. She waited until things settled. I rinsed one plate under warm water, watching the steam rise. Mom, she said gently. I turned. She was standing by the sink now, holding a dish towel. Her eyes were still a little red but steady. You okay? I thought about that. Not the way people usually answer, not the automatic I'm fine or I'll be okay. I checked in with myself. My chest felt lighter than it had in months. My shoulders weren't tight. My hands weren't shaking. I am, I said. And I meant it. She nodded like she understood something deeper than the words. I didn't know, she said after a moment, about any of it. I know. We stood there in silence for a few seconds, just the sound of running water between us. Then she said, I'm proud of you. That hit harder than anything else had that day. Not the betrayal, not the confrontation, not even the look on Daniel's face when he realized it was over. That sentence. I reached for the counter behind me and steadied myself. "Thank you," I said quietly. She gave a small smile. "Took you long enough." I let out a soft breath that almost turned into a laugh. "Yeah," I said, "it did." We finished cleaning together. Nothing dramatic, just rinsing, drying, putting things back where they belonged. The kind of quiet work that feels normal, familiar. By the time she left, the house looked like it always had. But it didn't feel the same. That night, Daniel slept in the guest room. We didn't argue. There was nothing left to argue about. He tried once, standing in the hallway, papers still in his hand. "Lisa, we can still figure something out." I looked at him. We just did. He didn't have anything to say after that. The divorce moved faster than I expected. Nancy handled everything with a kind of calm efficiency I came to appreciate. The financial records helped. Not just the affair, but the way he'd used the business accounts. It made things clearer on paper, simpler in a legal sense. I kept the house. That mattered more than I thought it would. Not because of the walls or the mortgage, but because of what it represented. Stability, ground I had held for years. Daniel fought it at first, then less, then not at all. His business took a hit. Tom didn't walk away completely, but things changed. Clients started asking questions. Some left. Word has a way of moving quietly in towns like ours. I didn't take satisfaction in that. But I didn't feel sorry either. Karen moved out within a month. I heard through a neighbor that she'd rented a place in Plainfield. Smaller, quieter. Mike filed for divorce not long after. I saw him once at a grocery store. We passed each other near the produce section. He gave a small nod. I returned it. That was enough. There's something about going through something like that, something that breaks your life open, that changes how you recognize other people who've been through it too. No words needed. Just recognition. A few months later, the house felt different again. Not empty. Just quieter in a way that didn't feel heavy. I started noticing things I hadn't in years. The way the morning light came through the kitchen window around 7:15, the sound of the mail slot closing in the afternoon, the rhythm of my own day without having to adjust around someone else's habits. One morning I made coffee and carried it out to the back porch. It was early spring, still cool. The grass hadn't fully come back yet, patches of brown mixed with green. Somewhere down the block, someone started a lawnmower. That low, steady hum carried through the air. I sat down in the chair Daniel and I had bought years ago. Now it was just mine. I wrapped both hands around the mug and took a slow sip. For a long time I'd thought peace would feel like something big, like a moment you'd recognize right away. It didn't. It felt like this. Quiet, steady, uncomplicated. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I just felt like I wasn't losing anymore. Like I'd stopped carrying things that were never mine to hold. Emily came by more often after that. Sometimes with the kids, sometimes alone. We'd sit at the kitchen table with coffee talking about small things. Her work, the boys' school, what she was making for dinner that night. Normal conversations. The kind I used to rush through. One afternoon she looked around the house and said, "It feels different here." I smiled a little. "It is." She nodded. "Better," she said. I didn't argue with that. Every now and then I'd catch myself thinking about that Tuesday. The sound of the water running upstairs, the smell of lavender, the moment my hand touched that latch. Not with anger, just awareness. That was the moment everything shifted. Not when I found them. Not when I filed. Not even at that dinner table. It was when I chose not to react the way I always had. When I stopped smoothing things over. Stopped explaining things away. Stopped making myself smaller so someone else could stay comfortable. That was the real line. Trust isn't about never questioning anything. And silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's just waiting. Waiting until you're ready. Until you're clear. Until the truth can stand on its own without you having to push it. If you've ever had a moment like that where everything changes in a single afternoon, you probably know what I mean. You don't always need loud revenge. Sometimes you just need the truth. And the right moment to set it down.